Mrima Hill, where sacred land meets global economics, a comprehensive analysis. Introduction: the hill that could change everything. In the rolling hills of Kwale County, where Kenya meets Tanzania, lies a geological treasure that has captured the attention of mining companies, government officials, and international investors worldwide. Mrima Hill, seemingly unremarkable from the surface, harbors what experts describe as one of the world's largest deposits of niobium and rare earth elements. Yet beneath this economic potential lies a story that exemplifies one of the most pressing dilemmas of our time. How do we balance global economic needs with local cultural heritage and environmental preservation? This is not merely a tale of minerals and markets. It is a complex narrative that weaves together the threads of Indigenous rights, environmental conservation, international law, and the relentless demand for the materials that power our modern world. The story of Mrima Hill forces us to confront uncomfortable questions about who benefits from natural resource extraction, who bears the costs, and whether economic progress must inevitably come at the expense of cultural identity and environmental integrity. The geological gold mine. Understanding Mrima's strategic value. To comprehend the magnitude of what lies beneath Mrima Hill, we must first understand the critical importance of niobium and rare earth elements in our contemporary world. Niobium, a silvery white metal, possesses unique properties that make it indispensable in high-tech applications. It strengthens steel, making it lighter and more durable, which is crucial for everything from automotive manufacturing to aerospace engineering. In the realm of electronics, niobium capacitors are essential components in smartphones, laptops, and countless other devices that define modern life. Rare earth elements, despite their name, are not particularly rare in the Earth's crust. However, they are rarely found in economically viable concentrations, making deposits like Mrima Hill exceptionally valuable. These 17 elements are the invisible backbone of our technological civilization. They are essential for manufacturing permanent magnets used in wind turbines and electric vehicle motors, phosphors in LED lights and computer screens, and catalysts in petroleum refining. Without rare earth elements, the green energy transition that many nations are pursuing would be impossible. The global market for these materials is dominated by China, which controls approximately 80% of rare earth production and processing. This concentration of supply has created strategic vulnerabilities for countries seeking to reduce their dependence on Chinese sources. For Kenya, Mrima Hill represents not just an economic opportunity, but potentially a geopolitical asset that could position the country as a significant player in the global supply chain for critical minerals. Conservative estimates suggest that Mrima Hill contains reserves worth billions of dollars. The deposit is believed to hold substantial quantities of niobium, tantalum, and various rare earth elements, including neodymium and dysprosium, which are particularly valuable for renewable energy applications. For a developing nation like Kenya, where economic diversification beyond agriculture and tourism remains a priority, such a discovery represents a transformative opportunity. The sacred landscape. Understanding Digo cultural heritage. However, Mrima Hill's value cannot be measured solely in economic terms. For the Digo people, one of the 9 Mijikenda communities that have inhabited Kenya's coastal region for centuries, this hill represents something far more precious than any mineral deposit. It is the location of their ancestral kaya, a sacred forest that serves as the spiritual and cultural heart of their community. The concept of a kaya extends far beyond Western notions of sacred space. These forest groves are living repositories of Mijikenda culture, containing shrines, burial sites, and ritual spaces that have been maintained for generations. They serve as centers for traditional governance, where elders meet to make decisions affecting the community. The forests themselves are carefully protected ecosystems maintained through traditional conservation practices that have preserved biodiversity for centuries. The Digo Kaya at Mrima Hill is not merely a religious site. It is a comprehensive cultural institution that encompasses governance, education, conflict resolution, and spiritual practice. Traditional ceremonies conducted in the Kaya mark important life transitions, seasonal changes, and community celebrations. The forest contains medicinal plants used in traditional healing practices, many of which have been passed down through generations of traditional healers. For the Digo people, the destruction of their Kaya would represent not just the loss of a religious site, but the severing of their connection to their ancestors, their cultural identity, and their traditional systems of knowledge. This perspective fundamentally conflicts with the economic logic that views the land primarily in terms of its mineral wealth and potential contribution to national development. The cultural significance of Mrima Hill extends beyond the Digo community to the broader Mijikenda cultural complex. The Kaya forests are recognized by UNESCO as part of Kenya's cultural heritage, acknowledging their importance not just to local communities, but to humanity as a whole. This international recognition adds another layer of complexity to the debate over mining rates, as it suggests that the preservation of these sites serves interests beyond those of the immediate local community. Environmental considerations, an ecosystem under threat. The environmental dimensions of the Mrima Hill controversy add yet another layer of complexity to an already intricate situation. The coastal forests of Kenya are among the most biodiverse ecosystems in East Africa, harboring numerous endemic species that exist nowhere else on Earth. These forests represent remnants of what was once a much larger forest ecosystem that stretched along the East African coast. Mrima Hill itself supports a unique ecosystem that has evolved over thousands of years. The hill's geological composition, combined with its coastal location and elevation, create microclimates that support specialized plant and animal communities. Environmental surveys have identified numerous species of conservation concern in the area, including rare butterflies, endemic plant species, and threatened bird populations. The mining of niobium and rare earth elements is inherently disruptive to the environment. Open-pit mining, which would likely be necessary to extract the minerals from Mrima Hill efficiently, requires the removal of vast quantities of overburden and topsoil. This process would permanently alter the landscape and eliminate existing ecosystems. Moreover, the processing of rare earth elements involves the use of acids and other chemicals that can contaminate soil and water resources if not properly managed. The environmental concerns extend beyond the immediate mining site. The transportation of heavy mining equipment and the export of extracted minerals would require significant infrastructure development, including roads and potentially port facilities. This infrastructure development could fragment remaining forest habitats and increase pressure on already vulnerable ecosystems throughout the region. Climate change adds urgency to these environmental considerations. Coastal forests play crucial roles in carbon sequestration and climate regulation. They also provide important buffers against sea level rise and coastal erosion, which are increasing concerns as global temperatures rise. The destruction of these forests for mining purposes could undermine Kenya's broader climate adaptation and mitigation strategies. However, environmental activists and conservationists face a complex challenge in opposing the Mrima Hill mining project. The minerals that would be extracted from the site are essential for renewable energy technologies that are crucial for addressing climate change globally. This creates a paradoxical situation where environmental protection at the local level could potentially hinder environmental protection at the global level. The corporate players, Cortec Mining and International Investment. The company at the center of the Mrima Hill controversy, Cortec Mining Kenya Limited, represents the intersection of international capital and local resource extraction. CoreTech is a subsidiary of Base Resources, an Australian mining company that specializes in mineral sands and heavy minerals. The involvement of an Australian company in Kenyan mining reflects the global nature of the extractive industries and the complex web of international relationships that characterize modern resource extraction. CoreTech's approach to the Mrima Hill project reflects contemporary mining industry practices that emphasize community engagement and environmental responsibility, at least in rhetoric. The company has commissioned environmental impact assessments, conducted community consultations, and promised to implement international best practices in mining operations. However, critics argue that these measures are insufficient to address the fundamental concerns raised by local communities and environmental groups. The financial stakes for CoreTech and its investors are substantial. The company has already invested millions of dollars in exploration and feasibility studies at Mrima Hill. The potential returns from successful mining operations could be enormous, given the strategic value of the minerals involved and the projected growth in demand for rare earth elements. This creates strong incentives for the company to pursue the project despite local opposition. The involvement of international investors adds another dimension to the controversy. The funding for mining projects like Mrima Hill often comes from pension funds, sovereign wealth funds, and other institutional investors in developed countries. These investors may be geographically and culturally distant from the sites where mining takes place, yet their financial interests can drive decision-making processes that profoundly affect local communities. The corporate structure of modern mining operations also complicates accountability and responsibility. CoreTech Mining Kenya Limited is a local subsidiary of an Australian parent company, which may itself be owned by shareholders around the world. This distributed ownership structure can make it difficult to hold any single entity accountable for the social and environmental impacts of mining operations. Legal battles and regulatory challenges. The Mrima Hill case has generated a complex web of legal challenges that illustrate the difficulties of balancing competing interests within existing legal frameworks. The initial granting of exploration licenses to CoreTech Mining sparked immediate legal challenges from environmental groups and community organizations. These challenges raised questions about the adequacy of the consultation process, the consideration of cultural and environmental factors, and the transparency of government decision-making. Kenya's legal framework for mining reflects the country's efforts to modernize its extractive industries while protecting environmental and community interests. The Mining Act of 2016 includes provisions for environmental impact assessments, community consultation, and benefit sharing agreements. However, critics argue that these legal protections are insufficient and poorly enforced, particularly when they conflict with powerful economic interests. The legal challenges to the Mrima Hill project have focused on several key issues. First, plaintiffs have argued that the environmental impact assessment process was inadequate and failed to properly consider the project's potential impacts on biodiversity and ecosystem services. Second, they have contended that the consultation process with local communities was superficial and failed to obtain genuine consent from affected populations. Cultural rights have emerged as a particularly complex legal issue in the Mrima Hill case. While Kenya's constitution recognizes the right of communities to practice their culture and protect their cultural heritage, the practical implementation of these rights in the context of resource extraction remains unclear. The case has highlighted the need for more robust legal frameworks that can effectively balance economic development with cultural preservation. The international dimensions of the legal dispute add further complexity. When the Kenyan government revoked CoreTech's licenses in response to community pressure and legal challenges, the company initiated international arbitration proceedings, claiming that the government's actions violated bilateral investment treaties. This has created a situation where domestic legal decisions are subject to challenge in international forums, potentially undermining national sovereignty over natural resources. International arbitration when domestic decisions meet global law. The escalation of the Mrima Hill dispute to international arbitration represents a significant development that extends far beyond the immediate parties involved. When Cortec Mining's licenses were revoked by the Kenyan government, the company invoked the provisions of bilateral investment treaties between Kenya and Australia to seek compensation through international arbitration. International investment arbitration operates according to a different logic than domestic legal systems. While domestic courts must balance various social, environmental, and cultural considerations, arbitration panels typically focus primarily on whether government actions have violated the property rights of foreign investors. This can create situations where decisions that are legally and democratically legitimate within a country's domestic legal system are nevertheless deemed to violate international investment law. The Mrima Hill arbitration case raises fundamental questions about the relationship between national sovereignty and international investment law. Can a country's democratic institutions legitimately decide that certain areas should be protected from mining for cultural or environmental reasons? Or do international investment treaties create overriding obligations to protect foreign investors' rights? The financial implications of the arbitration are substantial. Cortec is seeking compensation not only for its actual expenditures on the project, but also for the projected profits it would have earned from mining operations. Given the potential value of the mineral deposits, this could amount to hundreds of millions of dollars, representing a significant financial burden for the Kenyan government. The case also highlights the broader implications of international investment law for developing countries' ability to regulate extractive industries. If governments face the prospect of massive compensation payments whenever they restrict mining projects for social or environmental reasons, this could have a chilling effect on environmental protection and community rights. Community voices. The struggle for recognition. Throughout the Mrima Hill controversy, the voices of local communities have often been marginalized in discussions dominated by corporate interest, government policy, and international law. However, the Digo people and their allies have demonstrated remarkable persistence and creativity in asserting their rights and making their concerns heard. Community resistance to the mining project has taken various forms, from traditional governance mechanisms to modern advocacy strategies. Elders from the Digo community have used traditional conflict resolution processes to build consensus within their community and communicate their position to external actors. At the same time, younger community members have embraced social media and other modern communication tools to raise awareness about their cause and build solidarity with other communities facing similar challenges. The community's opposition to mining at Mrima Hill is not simply a rejection of development or progress. Rather, it represents a different vision of development that prioritizes cultural continuity, environmental sustainability, and community control over natural resources. Many community members have proposed alternative economic activities that could provide income and employment while preserving the cultural and environmental values of the area. Women in the community have played particularly important roles in organizing resistance to the mining project. In many Mijikenda communities, women are the primary custodians of traditional ecological knowledge and play central roles in managing natural resources. Their opposition to mining reflects deep understanding of the potential impacts on local ecosystems and livelihoods. The struggle of the Digo community has resonated with Indigenous and traditional communities around the world who face similar challenges. International Indigenous rights organizations have provided support and advocacy, helping to frame the Mrima Hill case as part of a broader global struggle for Indigenous rights and self-determination. Economic alternatives. Reimagining development. One of the most compelling aspects of the community response to the Mrima Hill mining project has been the articulation of alternative economic visions that could provide sustainable livelihoods while preserving cultural and environmental values. These alternatives challenge the assumption that mining represents the only viable path to economic development in the area. Ecotourism has emerged as one potential alternative that could capitalize on the area's natural beauty and cultural significance. The presence of the sacred kaya, combined with the area's biodiversity, could attract visitors interested in cultural tourism and nature-based experiences. Such tourism could provide employment for local guides, accommodations, and craft producers, while generating revenue that remains within the community. Traditional medicine represents another potential economic opportunity that builds on existing community knowledge and practices. The medicinal plants found in the kaya forests could be sustainably harvested and processed for local and regional markets, providing income for traditional healers and their communities. This approach would require careful management to ensure sustainability, but it could offer economic benefits while preserving traditional knowledge systems. Global supply chains, the broader context. The Mrima Hill controversy cannot be understood in isolation from global trends in mineral demand and supply chain security. The increasing demand for rare earth elements and other critical minerals is driven by several converging factors: the global transition to renewable energy, the electrification of transportation, the continued growth of consumer electronics, and the expansion of digital technologies. This demand is projected to continue growing rapidly over the coming decades. The International Energy Agency estimates that demand for critical minerals could increase by up to 6 times by 2040, driven primarily by clean energy technologies. Electric vehicles alone could account for a significant portion of this increased demand, as they require several times more critical minerals than conventional vehicles. The geopolitical dimensions of critical mineral supply chains add urgency to the search for new sources. China's dominance in rare earth production and processing has created strategic vulnerabilities for other countries, particularly as U.S.-China relations have become more competitive. The COVID-19 pandemic and recent supply chain disruptions have further highlighted the risks of overdependence on single suppliers or regions. For Kenya, the development of critical mineral resources like those at Mrima Hill could provide significant economic and strategic benefits. Beyond the direct revenue from mining operations, the development of local processing capabilities could add value and create additional employment. Kenya could potentially become a regional hub for critical mineral supply chains, serving markets in Europe, Asia, and North America. However, the benefits of participating in global critical mineral supply chains are not automatically distributed equally. Without careful planning and strong governance institutions, resource extraction can lead to what economists call the resource curse, a situation where natural resource wealth fails to translate into broad-based economic development and may even undermine other sectors of the economy. Environmental justice. Who bears the costs? The Mrima Hill case exemplifies broader questions of environmental justice, the fair distribution of environmental benefits and burdens across different communities and populations. The minerals that would be extracted from Mrima Hill would primarily benefit consumers and industries in wealthy countries, while the environmental and cultural costs would be borne primarily by local communities in Kenya. This pattern is common in extractive industries worldwide, where natural resources are extracted from developing countries to supply markets in developed countries. The communities that live near extraction sites often bear the costs of environmental degradation, social disruption, and cultural loss, while receiving relatively few benefits from the economic value created by resource extraction. The environmental justice implications of critical mineral extraction are particularly complex because these minerals are essential for technologies that address climate change, a global environmental problem that disproportionately affects developing countries. This creates a situation where environmental protection at the local level may conflict with environmental protection at the global level. The concept of sacrifice zones, areas where environmental degradation is accepted in service of broader economic goals, is relevant to understanding the Mrima Hill controversy. The designation of certain areas as acceptable locations for environmentally destructive activities often reflects power imbalances rather than rational planning processes. Climate justice advocates argue that the transition to renewable energy must not simply reproduce the inequitable patterns that characterize fossil fuel industries. Instead, the clean energy transition should be designed to distribute both costs and benefits more equitably, ensuring that communities that contribute to solving climate change also benefit from the solutions. Cultural preservation in a global economy. The tension between economic development and cultural preservation that characterizes the Mrima Hill case reflects broader challenges that traditional communities face in an increasingly globalized world. How can Indigenous and traditional cultures maintain their identity and practices while also participating in modern economic systems? The UNESCO recognition of kaya forests as cultural heritage sites represents an important step toward international recognition of the value of traditional cultural practices. However, such recognition often comes with its own challenges, including the risk of museumization, treating living cultures as static artifacts rather than dynamic systems that must evolve to survive. The Digo community's approach to preserving their kaya while engaging with modern economic and political systems provides insights into how traditional communities can navigate these challenges. Rather than rejecting all forms of change, they have selectively adopted modern tools and strategies while maintaining core cultural values and practices. The case also highlights the importance of legal and policy frameworks that recognize and protect cultural rights. While many countries have constitutional provisions protecting cultural heritage, the practical implementation of these protections often falls short when they conflict with powerful economic interests. International law has increasingly recognized the rights of Indigenous and traditional communities, including the right to free, prior, and informed consent regarding projects that affect their territories and resources. However, the implementation of these standards remains inconsistent, and communities often lack the resources and political power necessary to enforce their rights effectively. Technological solutions and innovations. As the Mrima Hill controversy continues, technological innovations may offer new approaches to balancing economic development with cultural and environmental protection. Advanced mining techniques, for example, could potentially reduce the environmental footprint of mineral extraction, though they cannot eliminate it entirely. In situ leaching and other less invasive extraction methods might allow for mineral recovery while preserving surface ecosystems and cultural sites. However, these technologies are not applicable to all types of mineral deposits and may not be economically viable for the specific geological conditions at Mrima Hill. Recycling and circular economy approaches offer another pathway for reducing pressure on primary mineral sources. Improved recycling of rare earth elements from electronic waste could reduce the demand for newly mined materials, though recycling alone cannot meet projected demand growth. Substitution of critical minerals with more abundant materials represents another technological frontier. Research into alternative materials for permanent magnets, batteries, and other applications could reduce dependence on rare earth elements, though such substitution efforts have had limited success to date. Digital technologies could also play a role in improving the governance of extractive industries. Blockchain-based systems for tracking mineral supply chains could improve transparency and accountability, while satellite monitoring could provide independent verification of environmental impacts. The role of international cooperation. The global nature of critical mineral supply chains suggests that international cooperation may be necessary to address the challenges exemplified by the Mrima Hill case. Multilateral initiatives focused on responsible mining, supply chain transparency, and equitable benefit sharing could help ensure that the extraction of critical minerals serves broader development goals. International development cooperation could support countries like Kenya in developing the institutional capacity necessary to manage natural resources effectively. This could include technical assistance for environmental monitoring, legal frameworks for community consultation, and economic analyses of different development options. Regional cooperation within Africa could also play an important role. The African Union has developed various initiatives focused on natural resource governance and regional integration. A coordinated African approach to critical mineral development could potentially provide greater leverage in negotiations with international companies and consuming countries. South-South cooperation between countries that face similar challenges in managing natural resources could facilitate the sharing of experiences and best practices. Countries like Chile and South Africa, which have extensive experience with mining industries, could provide valuable insights for Kenya and other African countries developing their extractive sectors. Future scenarios. Possible pathways forward. As the Mrima Hill case continues to evolve, several different scenarios remain possible, each with different implications for the various stakeholders involved. The first scenario involves the eventual development of mining operations at Mrima Hill, potentially after modifications to address some community and environmental concerns. This could involve reduced scale operations, enhanced environmental protections, and increased benefit sharing with local communities. While this scenario would provide economic benefits, it would likely result in some degree of cultural and environmental loss. A second scenario involves the permanent protection of Mrima Hill from mining, either through legal designation as a protected area or through successful community resistance. This scenario would preserve cultural and environmental values, but would forego the potential economic benefits of mineral extraction. It could also result in significant compensation payments to core tech mining through international arbitration. A third scenario involves compromise solutions that allow for some form of economic development while preserving core cultural and environmental values. This could include alternative economic activities like ecotourism or potentially limited mineral extraction that avoids the most sensitive areas of the Kaya. A fourth scenario involves technological or market developments that reduce the economic value of Mrima Hill deposits. Successful recycling programs, material substitution, or the discovery of alternative mineral sources could reduce demand for new extraction, making the preservation of the site more economically feasible. The likelihood of each scenario depends on various factors, including the outcome of legal proceedings, changes in government policy, developments in international commodity markets, and the effectiveness of community organizing efforts. Lessons for sustainable development. The Mrima Hill case offers important lessons for sustainable development policy and practice. First, it demonstrates the importance of inclusive decision-making processes that genuinely engage all affected stakeholders from the earliest stages of project development. Top-down approaches that treat communities as obstacles to overcome rather than partners in development are likely to generate conflict and resistance. Second, the case highlights the need for legal and institutional frameworks that can effectively balance competing interests and values. This requires not only strong environmental and cultural protection laws, but also effective mechanisms for implementing and enforcing these protections. Third, the case illustrates the importance of considering alternatives to resource extraction and ensuring that all options are fully evaluated before irreversible decisions are made. The pressure to exploit natural resources quickly can lead to inadequate consideration of alternative development pathways. Fourth, the international dimensions of the case demonstrate the need for reform of international investment law to ensure that legitimate domestic policy decisions cannot be undermined by investor-state arbitration. This may require renegotiation of existing treaties and development of new approaches to balancing investor protection with policy space for environmental and cultural protection. Conclusion. The continuing struggle for justice. The story of Mrima Hill remains unfinished, with the various legal, political, and economic processes still unfolding. However, the case has already made important contributions to our understanding of the challenges and opportunities involved in managing natural resources in the 21st century. At its heart, the Mrima Hill case is about power. Who has the power to make decisions about natural resources, who benefits from those decisions, and who bears the costs? It is about the tension between global economic forces and local communities, between short-term profits and long-term sustainability, between different ways of understanding and valuing the natural world. The case also demonstrates the agency and resilience of traditional communities in the face of powerful external pressures. The Digo people's defense of their kaya shows that local communities are not passive victims of globalization, but active agents who can organize, resist, and propose alternatives. As the world grapples with climate change, resource scarcity, and growing inequality, the questions raised by the Mrima Hill case will only become more pressing. How can we meet our material needs while preserving cultural diversity and environmental integrity? How can we ensure that the costs and benefits of development are distributed fairly? How can we create decision-making processes that respect the rights and values of all stakeholders? These questions do not have easy answers, but the Mrima Hill case provides a valuable lens through which to examine them. It reminds us that behind every mine, every supply chain, and every piece of technology are real communities with their own histories, values, and aspirations. Their voices deserve to be heard, and their rights deserve to be respected as we work towards a more just and sustainable future. The hill that could change everything continues to stand. Its future uncertain, but its significance is clear. Whether it becomes a source of prosperity or a symbol of loss will depend on our collective ability to find ways of living that honor both human needs and natural limits, both global connections and local roots, both economic opportunity and cultural heritage.